Hello YouTube, welcome back to Kind Heart Homestead. I'm here in the parking lot of the closest Home Depot, which is over an hour from our off-grid property in the mountains of Virginia. I have some doors and some trim here, as well as some deadbolt locks. So I'm gonna try to get these back to the property in one piece, and I'll see if I can get those installed today. So stick around, and I'll be right back. As you can tell from behind me, I have this kind of set up as a bedroom from our last trip because there was a storm coming in. But because I arrived so late this trip, I decided to just keep it set up as a bedroom, not wreck the space in any way, getting sawdust and stuff in here. But I think I'd like to continue sleeping in here. So what I'm gonna try to do is set up my sawhorses and do all my cutting outside. And then if I have to do any blocking or anything in here, it's gonna be with power tools and hopefully it won't make that much of a mess. This little campsite area is all set up on top of a tarp. So I think I'm gonna bundle everything up into the smallest footprint possible and fold the tarp up over it to prevent any sort of dust from getting on my gear. So right now I'm just gonna try to convert this back to a construction zone. Now that my tools are accessible, I want to start getting this stuff out of the truck, but I don't want to just dump it in a pile because I need to be strategic on how I move these around by myself. I don't have Angie here to help me this time. So I have that gorilla cart, and I think I'm going to use that to transport these doors flat to where they need to go. I have two exterior doors, one for the front, one for the back, one interior door that opens to the bathroom. So the bathroom one I can go ahead and bring in, but the other two, they should lean against the wall in their respective areas to make it easier for me to install when the time comes. I'm sitting here where the entry door is going to be installed, and I hope you can see this. I'm sitting on the bottom plate. It's been here this whole time because I didn't know exactly what size door I was going to get, and I believe it's possible that different brands could have different rough openings even if the door is the same size. Maybe they have different size door jambs and trims that go around. Regardless, I waited till now to worry about this. And what I need to do is actually frame the door before I can install it, and obviously before I can install the sheathing. If you look down here, you can see where I measured and traced lines representing the 34-inch opening that I need to install this door. It actually says 34.25, but I think 34 inches is fine. You can see over here, there's a line with a J. That 1.5 inch segment is where the jack stud is going to go. The jack stud is what holds up the header. Next to that is the king stud, and you can see half of that stud is going to be over the anchor bolt. And I don't think that's too problematic. I have Forstner bits. I can kind of hollow out a little channel in the end and make sure that there's still wood bearing to continuously support the load, but there's also a gap so it sits flush over the screw. Over here though, this is just where the jack stud is going to go, because this framing member that's very sturdy because it has, I don't know, probably 20 or so nails in it from the sheathing, that's going to be the king stud. I could notch a 3.5 section out of it to slide the header over this and then put a king stud on the other side, and that wouldn't be too difficult. I'd probably only have to worry about 1 or 2 nails. But I decided to go with this approach. I have my galvanized nails ready for the bottom plate. I'm going to go ahead and hammer in the king stud over here, so then I can measure everything for level and to make sure everything's parallel and ready for the header. I have my 37-inch gap between the two king studs. That's because I added 3 inches to the 34-inch rough opening. So now I need to cut some boards to build a header out of this exact width. I can nail it in place from the sides and then put the jack studs underneath. So measuring both sides makes sense, but I typically don't like to leave it up to my own concrete floor skill or subfloor skill. Whatever the floor is made out of, it could still have variations. So what I want to do is use my laser level to connect the dots, see if they're the same elevation. So that was almost a 1/4 inch off. I had to get the scaffold out because I couldn't see the line to use the laser level. So I used the higher of the two just so I could have an extra buffer. But now I know where the jack stud should terminate. So even if these are two different lengths of jack stud, they're going to come out to the exact same height. So this is how I build simple window and door headers, at least for a 2x4 framed wall. The goal is to make your header the same thickness as the wall framing. Otherwise, when you try to attach drywall to it, it's going to get sucked in with the screws. So 1.5 inches plus 1.5 inches is 3 inches. So you need an extra 1/2 inch. My sheathing happens to be around the 1/2 inch mark. It's 7/16. And so it's only a 1/16 off. That's very reasonable for drywall tolerances. So I'm using my miter saw just as kind of like a square jig area. So I can push all of this back to make sure that it's all on the same plane. And then I put a bunch of nails through it. So that was about 12 nails, and there's only one that's proud, and I'll just have to hammer that in. That's okay. But as you can see here, what I did was cut 2 identical 2x4s, and then I traced the line of one of the 2x4s onto the scrap of sheathing that I have. I have these long strips because I cut off the ends when I was putting up the roof sheathing. But now I have this funny looking part that's long, and I'm gonna have to manually address that with my circular saw. I unintentionally planed some of this, but that's fine. It just makes it a bit flatter. Check that out. Perfect header. Obviously, if you were using 2x6s for your framing, your header would have to be much thicker. And when that's the case, you can actually fit some insulation in there. And as far as building science is concerned, anywhere that a frame is and insulation isn't is a thermal bridge from the inside climate-controlled space to the outside. So theoretically, the fewer studs that you have, the more insulation you can have. And there's formulas you can use to figure out, as you adjust the spacing of the studs, how much more insulated the space is. But if you have 2x6 studs, then you can sister foam board in between these somehow, or maybe on one side of it. Maybe you don't need blocking on both sides of your wall. Maybe you just need it on the inside for drywall. If that's the case, maybe you would have a stud and then the rest of it would be insulation, but it all depends on what sort of load-bearing weight that you have to handle with your header. Now it's time to get these jack studs and header in. Obviously I need to add some more nails, but that's about it for the rough opening. For drywall purposes, I need to add a few tiny little scrap 2x4 blocks up there to continue the 16-inch on center layout, just in case there's a seam of drywall or something that needs to be nailed to that. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish up the nailing now and then get ready for the door installation. So I pulled back the weather stripping on this side to get a few large decking screws through the shims into the framing. And by adjusting the shims, I'm able to even out the reveal. So when I close the door, you can see a small gap between the door jamb and the door. And if it's wavy, you need to adjust it with shims. I always start with the hinge side first. This manufacturer left out one screw from each hinge and included longer screws in the bag. I put a shim near each hinge and put a screw through. So now I'm ready to do the hardware. So the included plate for this deadbolt is much larger than the recess that came with this door jamb. So let me show you what I'm doing. First, I held the plate up. I looked through the reveal to kind of see whether the deadbolt fell towards the top or the bottom of the hole, and it fell towards the bottom. So I decided to align this with the top and extend it to the bottom. I don't plan to chisel out the hole here, but if I did, I would go down instead of up. Also, I'm facing the larger hole farther in, so it gets a deeper penetration into the stud. All I did was align it with this, use a razor blade to trace all the way around, and then I went back over it a couple times, just like this. You have to be careful not to overcut and damage the seal here. But now that I have that, I'm going to try out a chisel. It's the next morning. That was my first night in the shed with the door installed. There's a lot less cold air blowing through the building. I still don't have the soffits sealed or any sort of insulation in there, so there's still the occasional moth that finds its way in and can't get out and is attracted to my light. That's kind of annoying, but it's only going to improve from here. Making some pancakes, chocolate chip style, trying to get some energy going for the day, warm up. Got my coffee. So hopefully today I can get the other exterior door installed. And if I still have time, I might start on the bathroom framing. So I'm here at the back of the building. I just moved some of my tools and stuff around to give me some space to work. But I need this door to be isolated to this last piece of 7/16 zip sheathing. the way that the spacing works is every seam has a stud. So obviously every 4 feet there's a stud, but with 16 inches on center, there's actually 3 cavities for insulation. That's a stud on each edge and then 2 center studs. You can see I haven't nailed these yet, they're vibrating. I actually need to knock these 2 out because the door needs a 34¼ inch rough opening. Once these 2 go, this one will act as the king stud on the right side. I'll have a jack stud here, header going across, and then another jack and king over here. Alright, so I drilled out the end of this king stud to accommodate the anchor bolt that's down in the bottom plate. But this one is actually centered, and then you'll never be able to see the anchor bolt again. Hopefully the inspector will be able to see the washer and know that it's there. Anyway, to calculate the distance between the king studs, you take your rough opening and you add 3 inches, because the 2 jack studs, which are 1.5 inches, combined to make 3 inches. I just tucked a piece of rigid foam back here. Now I can install the king stud and finish the framing for the bathroom window. Well, I just cleaned up and I'm getting ready for my third night here on this trip, a bit longer than usual, but because I am able to sleep inside the building, I'm able to take my time a bit more, take lots of breaks, get more things done. I got the small window in, I got the utility room door and the main door with their respective doorknobs and locks intact. I would call that very productive. The only thing I have to do left on this trip is take some measurements to get ready to order the metal. That includes the roof and the siding. But there's a lot of trim details involved and I have to be very meticulous. I keep a lot of spreadsheets about all the specific parts that I want. But now that the building is basically intact, all the measurements are stuck as they are. I should actually get the exact measurement rather than relying on my SketchUp designs because there could be slight fluctuations. Anyway, if you want to see how that goes, or if you're interested in the solar projects I have coming up, the plumbing projects, electrical for this building, then please go ahead and subscribe. Start a discussion down in the comments for what you'd like to see, or especially if you see me doing anything wrong, please let me know. Anyway, I'll see you next time on Kind Heart Homestead. Thanks, bye.